Nobody inside the Moretti estate understood why Damien Moretti was in such a terrible mood. By 10 o'clock that morning, 3 bodyguards had already been reassigned to warehouse duty after making minor mistakes. One trusted captain had nearly lost his position for interrupting a meeting half a second too early. A negotiation involving an $8 million shipping contract had been postponed because Damien abruptly walked out before anyone finished speaking. The mansion had fallen into complete silence. Staff whispered only when absolutely necessary. Footsteps became softer. Doors closed more carefully. Even the chefs lowered their voices in the kitchen. Everyone assumed someone had betrayed the Moretti family. After all, Damien Moretti wasn't known for losing his temper without reason. He was known for something far worse: control. The man had once negotiated with rival syndicates while a gun was pointed at his chest, without changing the tone of his voice. He had buried enemies without blinking. He had stared down federal investigations with the same calm expression he used while drinking his morning espresso. Fear simply wasn't an emotion people associated with Damien Moretti. Until today. Inside his office, another expensive fountain pen cracked between his fingers. Marco DeSantis, Damien's longtime underboss, quietly glanced at the broken pieces before pretending not to notice. No one commented. No one breathed louder than necessary. Damien stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate grounds, but he wasn't seeing the gardens. He was seeing an empty breakfast chair. Every morning for nearly 3 years, someone had walked into his study carrying black coffee, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and exactly 2 slices of orange because his physician insisted he needed more vitamins. Every morning, she reminded him to eat. Every morning he ignored her. Every morning she ignored his refusal and quietly placed the plate where he couldn't avoid seeing it. Eventually, he always ate. Not because he was hungry. Because she would smile whenever she returned later and found the plate empty. It had become such an ordinary routine that Damien had stopped questioning why the highlight of his mornings involved homemade bread baked by one of the estate's maids. Until this morning. She had been strangely quiet. No teasing reminder about his medication. No gentle argument over coffee. No fresh loaf cooling on the kitchen counter. And for reasons he refused to examine too closely. The entire estate suddenly felt colder. A soft knock interrupted the suffocating silence. 3 measured taps. Marco looked toward the door. "So?" A timid voice answered from outside. "Sir, may I come in?" Something shifted in Damien's expression. Barely noticeable. But Marco saw it. So it's her, he thought. "Come in." The heavy oak door opened slowly. Hannah Brooks stepped inside, carrying a neatly organized stack of housekeeping reports against her chest. She wore the same simple uniform she had worn almost every day for 3 years. Her soft brown hair was tied into a loose bun. A few stubborn curls framed her round face. Her gentle smile appeared almost apologetic, as though she were worried about interrupting people far more important than herself. She thanked every gardener by name, remembered every employee's birthday, brought soup to 6 security guards without telling anyone. Half the estate quietly believed she was the kindest person living behind the mansion walls. The other half secretly wondered how someone so warm had survived 3 years working for Damien Moretti. She stopped a respectful distance from the desk. "I'm sorry for interrupting." Damien finally looked at her. "What is it?" "I finished organizing tomorrow's guest rooms." He nodded once. "The inventory reports are updated." Another nod. "The kitchen requested approval for next week's grocery order." Marco blinked. 5 minutes ago, Damien had nearly exploded because someone spoke during a meeting. Now he was patiently listening to grocery updates. Nobody dared react. Hannah hesitated. She shifted her weight nervously. "There is one more thing," Damien noticed immediately. She almost never hesitated. What? She lowered her eyes. I was wondering. Her fingers tightened slightly around the folder. If it wouldn't cause too much trouble. Marco suddenly found the carpet fascinating. Every instinct told him this conversation mattered far more than the business meeting waiting downstairs. Hannah took a slow breath. I may need to leave work an hour early today. The room became completely still. Damien rested both hands on the desk. For what reason? A faint blush warmed Hannah's cheeks. She smiled. Small, shy, almost embarrassed. My best friend finally convinced me to meet someone. She laughed softly. It's only dinner. Another tiny pause. I have a date tonight. Silence. A sharp crack echoed through the office. Everyone looked down. Damien's fountain pen had snapped cleanly in half. Dark ink slowly spread across the polished mahogany desk. No one moved. Marco had watched this man survive ambushes. He had watched him negotiate peace between families who had spent decades trying to kill each other. He had never seen Damien Moretti stare at a broken pen as though it had personally betrayed him. When Damien finally spoke, his voice was calm. Far too calm. A date. Yes. With whom? Hannah smiled apologetically. I actually don't know much about him yet. My friend Lucy arranged everything. They've only spoken online. Marco's stomach tightened. Damien's jaw flexed once. You've never met this man? No. And you're planning to have dinner alone with him. I know it sounds a little old-fashioned. She laughed again. But Lucy says he's very kind. For several long seconds, Damien said nothing. His expression remained unreadable. Only Marco noticed the subtle whitening of Damien's knuckles as his hand slowly closed around the broken pen. Then Damien leaned back. You may leave early. Relief instantly brightened Hannah's face. Thank you, sir. She turned and quietly left the office. The door clicked shut. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Finally, Damien looked toward Marco. Find out everything. Marco frowned. About the restaurant. Damien's eyes turned colder than winter. No. About the man who thinks he's taking Hannah Brooks to dinner. Marco understood immediately. This was no longer about a blind date. Somewhere deep inside, the city's most feared Mafia boss had just declared war against a man whose name he didn't even know yet. The office remained silent long after Hannah left. Marco waited. He had worked beside Damien Moretti for nearly 15 years. He knew better than to speak first when his boss wore that expression. Damien slowly wiped the spilled ink from his desk with a folded handkerchief. His movements were precise, controlled. Anyone walking into the room would think nothing had happened. Only Marco noticed the tiny fragments of the shattered fountain pen still embedded in Damien's palm. A thin line of blood ran across his fingers. He didn't seem to notice. Finally, Damien spoke. Gabriel. The head of intelligence appeared almost instantly from the adjoining office. Unlike the armed captains who commanded soldiers, Gabriel Russo commanded information. If something existed inside the city, Gabriel could usually find it. You called, boss. Damien nodded once. I need everything on a man. Gabriel pulled out a tablet. Name? I don't have one. Occupation? I don't know. Address? No. Gabriel looked up. What do we have? Damien's voice remained calm. He has dinner with Hannah Brooks tonight. Gabriel blinked. Marco lowered his head to hide the smile threatening to appear. After a brief pause, Gabriel carefully asked, Is this an official security concern? Damien answered without hesitation. It is now. Within seconds, Gabriel began issuing encrypted messages. Restaurant reservation databases, private investigators, facial recognition alerts, transportation records. Every available resource quietly shifted toward finding one completely ordinary man. Meanwhile, Hannah had absolutely no idea. She hummed softly while changing the linens in the guest wing. One of the younger housekeepers, Olivia Hayes, watched her with a grin. "You've smiled all morning." Hannah laughed. "Have I?" "You definitely have." Olivia leaned against the doorway. "So?" "So what? Tell me everything." "There isn't much to tell. You have a date." Hannah covered her face with both hands. "Please don't say it so loudly." Olivia laughed. "I've worked here 2 years and have never seen you interested in anyone." "I'm not interested." "Then why are you going?" Hannah carefully folded the final blanket. "Lucy says I spend too much time working." "She's probably right." And she thinks I deserve at least one nice evening." Olivia smiled warmly. "I agree." Hannah looked around the enormous guest suite. Sometimes she forgot how unusual her life had become. 3 years earlier, she had accepted the housekeeping position simply because it offered stable income and housing. She expected cold employers, strict schedules, luxury beyond anything she had ever imagined. She certainly hadn't expected Damien Moretti. The newspapers described him as ruthless. Television called him dangerous. Business magazines labeled him untouchable. But the man she saw every day looked lonely. He worked before sunrise. He often skipped lunch. He answered emails during dinner. Half the time she doubted he even noticed how exhausted he looked. Someone had to remind him to slow down. Eventually, that someone became her. At first, she reminded him because she was doing her job. Then, because nobody else would. She smiled to herself. "He'll probably forget dinner again tonight." Olivia noticed. "What are you smiling about now?" "Oh, nothing." Across the estate, Damien stood inside the mansion's private security room. Dozens of surveillance monitors covered one wall. Most displayed gates, warehouses, loading docks and shipping facilities. One screen showed the mansion's main kitchen. Hannah crossed the room, carrying a tray of freshly baked bread. She stopped to hand a warm roll to one of the gardeners before continuing on her way. Damien watched in silence. Marco quietly stepped beside him. "You know, this is becoming slightly obsessive." Damien never looked away. "She's too trusting." Marco folded his arms. "Or maybe she's simply kind. Kind people die first." Marco sighed. "There it is. The Mafia answer." Damien finally turned. "You disagree? I think you're looking for reasons." Damien's eyes narrowed. "What reasons?" "To convince yourself this has something to do with security." Neither man spoke for several seconds. Then Gabriel entered carrying a tablet. "I found him." Both men looked up immediately. The restaurant reservation was made through Lucy Bennett. He placed the tablet on the table. The date's name is Ethan Cross, 32 years old. Claims to work in international logistics. No criminal record. No outstanding warrants. No financial irregularities. Marco raised an eyebrow. "So, clean." Gabriel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he enlarged several photographs. "Too clean." Damien understood instantly. "What did you find?" "Ethan Cross doesn't exist before 18 months ago." Marco frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly that." Gabriel zoomed into several government databases. Driver's license issued 18 months ago. Tax history begins 18 months ago. Employment history begins 18 months ago. No childhood. No university records. No medical files. No photographs before that date. Marco's smile disappeared. "A manufactured identity." Gabriel nodded. "Professional grade." Damien stared at Ethan's smiling photograph. Average height, well-dressed, pleasant smile. Exactly the kind of man nobody remembered seeing, which made him dangerous. Gabriel continued. I kept digging. The identity traces back to a consulting firm. The consulting firm belongs to a holding company. The holding company. He stopped. Damien finished the sentence himself. Belongs to Victor Salvatore. Gabriel nodded. The rival syndicate. The room grew silent. Victor Salvatore had spent years trying to penetrate Moretti operations. He bribed politicians, bought shipping inspectors, placed informants inside construction companies, but never inside the mansion itself. Marco slowly exhaled. You think Hannah is the target? Damien shook his head. No, she's the doorway. At that exact moment, miles away in a quiet apartment, Hannah stood in front of her bedroom mirror. Lucy Bennett adjusted the collar of Hannah's soft blue dress. You look beautiful. I look nervous. That's normal. What if he doesn't like me? Lucy laughed. If he has functioning eyes, he'll like you. Hannah smiled shyly. I haven't been on a date in years. Lucy hugged her. Then tonight is the beginning of something wonderful. Neither woman noticed the black luxury sedan parked across the street. Inside, a man wearing an earpiece quietly lowered his binoculars. He pressed a single button. Target is preparing to leave. A cold voice answered through the speaker. Excellent. Phase 1 begins tonight. The early evening sky glowed with soft shades of gold as Hannah stepped out of the apartment building. She paused on the sidewalk and took a slow breath. It had been years since she had dressed for anything other than work. The blue dress Lucy had chosen wasn't expensive. It was simple, comfortable, elegant, in a quiet way. For the first time in a long while, Hannah looked at her reflection in the glass door and smiled. Maybe tonight would simply be normal. Lucy squeezed her arm. Stop worrying. I'm trying. No thinking about laundry. No worrying whether Mr. Moretti remembered dinner. No wondering if someone folded the guest towels correctly. Hannah laughed. I don't think like that. Lucy raised an eyebrow. You absolutely do. Hannah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Perhaps she was right. For 3 years, the estate had become her world. She knew every hallway, every employee, every gardener, every cook. She even knew which lights Damien preferred left on when he worked late into the night. Without realizing it, his routines had quietly become part of hers. Across the city, Damien stood beside a black SUV parked opposite the restaurant. Marco leaned against the vehicle with folded arms. This is your final chance. Damien didn't answer. You could still leave. Silence. Marco sighed. You know what a normal man would do. Damien looked at him. He'd admit he's jealous. I am not jealous. Marco almost laughed. You postponed an $8 million contract. You ordered background investigations on a stranger. You've placed surveillance around a restaurant. And you haven't blinked in 20 minutes. If this isn't jealousy, I'd hate to see what is. Damien's expression remained unreadable. I protect people under my roof. Marco smiled knowingly. Only one of them. Before Damien could respond, Gabriel's voice came through the earpiece. Boss, Ethan has arrived. Damien looked toward the restaurant entrance. A silver sedan stopped beside the curb. A tall man stepped out. Perfectly tailored suit, relaxed smile, confident posture. Nothing about Ethan Cross appeared threatening. That bothered Damien even more. Professional predators rarely looked dangerous. They looked trustworthy. Inside the restaurant, Hannah stood as Ethan approached. You must be Hannah. His smile seemed warm. She smiled back politely. And you must be Ethan. It's nice to finally meet you. He pulled out her chair before taking his own seat. For the next 20 minutes, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. He asked about her hobbies. She spoke about baking. He laughed at her stories about accidentally burning cookies during her first week at the estate. She admitted she loved gardening. He claimed he did too. Outside, Gabriel quietly handed Damien a tablet. "I found something." Damien glanced down. Security footage. Different cities. Different women. Ethan appeared beside each of them. Always smiling. Always charming. Always disappearing several weeks later. Marco frowned. "Who are they?" Gabriel answered softly. "Employees. Executive assistants. Receptionists. Bookkeepers. Women working close to powerful businessmen." Damien's eyes darkened. "A pattern." Gabriel nodded. "We've confirmed 6. There could be more." Inside, the waiter arrived carrying dinner. Hannah relaxed a little. Maybe Lucy had been right. Maybe she had worried for nothing. Ethan listened carefully whenever she spoke. He complimented her baking, asked thoughtful questions, never interrupted. He seemed kind. Then came one small question. "So, you work at the Moretti estate?" Hannah smiled. "Yes, it must be beautiful." "It really is." "How many people live there?" She hesitated. "I'm not really supposed to discuss work." Ethan immediately raised both hands. "Of course. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." His apology felt sincere. Hannah smiled again. No harm done. Across the room, a man sitting alone lowered his newspaper. Tiny camera hidden inside a button. Microphone concealed beneath the table. Every word had been recorded. He quietly texted one sentence. "Target is comfortable. Proceed to phase 2. Minutes later, Ethan casually continued the conversation. "I always admire people who work for successful families. It must be fascinating." Hannah shrugged. "It's mostly cleaning. Cooking. Helping wherever I'm needed. And Mr. Moretti." She looked surprised. "What about him? Is he really as intimidating as people say?" Hannah smiled despite herself. "He can be, but—" She stopped. "But what?" She looked down at her tea. "I think people misunderstand him." Outside, Damien froze. Marco slowly turned toward him. "Did she just defend you?" Damien didn't answer. His eyes never left the restaurant window. Inside, Ethan leaned forward with genuine interest. "So he's actually a good man?" Hannah considered the question carefully. "I don't know if good is the right word. But I've seen him pay medical bills for employees without telling anyone. I've seen him attend funerals when workers lost family members. I've seen him remember birthdays he pretended not to care about. He hides it. But he's kinder than people realize." For the first time all evening, Damien lowered his eyes. Marco smiled quietly. "She sees you." Before Damien could respond, Gabriel's phone vibrated sharply. His expression changed instantly. "What?" Marco noticed first. "What happened?" Gabriel turned the screen toward Damien. Satellite tracking. Encrypted messages. Known associates. One photograph. Victor Salvatore's chief lieutenant, entering an underground parking garage beneath the restaurant. 10 minutes earlier. Damien's voice dropped into the cold tone his men feared most. "He's here." Gabriel nodded. "Our surveillance team just lost visual. This was never just Ethan." Damien opened the SUV door. "Move." Inside the restaurant, Hannah laughed as Ethan told another story. She never noticed the waiter, who wasn't really a waiter. He quietly placed a fresh glass of sparkling water in front of her. His sleeve brushed the rim for less than a second, almost invisible. Then he walked away. Ethan looked down. A tiny smile flickered across his face, before disappearing just as quickly. Across the street, Damien stepped onto the sidewalk. Then he stopped. Through the restaurant window, he watched Hannah reach toward the untouched glass. At that exact moment, Gabriel shouted into his earpiece, "Boss, don't let her drink it. Boss, don't let her drink it." Gabriel's warning exploded through Damien's earpiece. For a split second, the world seemed to freeze. Through the restaurant window, Damien watched Hannah wrap her fingers around the sparkling water. She smiled politely at Ethan as she lifted the glass. Damien didn't think. He moved. The restaurant doors burst open so violently that every conversation inside stopped. Heads turned. Forks froze halfway to mouths. The pianist in the corner missed 3 notes before falling silent. Damien Moretti strode through the dining room with the controlled urgency of a man who had already calculated every possible outcome. His dark coat swept behind him. Marco and 2 security men entered seconds later, silently sealing every exit. Most of the guests recognized him immediately. Whispers spread through the room. "That's Damien Moretti. Why is he here? What happened?" Hannah looked up in surprise. "Sir?" Before she could stand, Damien reached the table. Without saying a single word, he took the glass from her hand. He smelled it once, then calmly poured the water into a nearby decorative flower pot. Within seconds, the plant's leaves began to curl. The stem darkened. A waitress screamed. The restaurant erupted into chaos. Hannah stared at the dying plant in disbelief. "What?" Damien turned toward Ethan. His expression was colder than winter. "You came prepared." Ethan remained seated. To his credit, he didn't panic. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "No?" Damien placed a small evidence bag on the table. Inside lay a nearly invisible dissolvable capsule. "Our chemists found an identical capsule inside the serving tray used by your waiter." The fake smile disappeared from Ethan's face. Marco quietly addressed the stunned restaurant manager. "Please ask everyone to remain calm. This is now a private security matter." Several guests immediately stood to leave. The security team politely, but firmly, blocked the exits. No one argued. Not after seeing the dead plant. Hannah slowly looked between Damien and Ethan. Confusion flooded her face. "Ethan, what's happening?" Ethan sighed. Then, he smiled. A completely different smile. Cold. Calculated. "So, I suppose the evening is over." Hannah's stomach tightened. "You knew?" He shrugged. "I knew enough." Damien stepped between them. "You used her." Ethan laughed quietly. "I preferred the word recruited." "I never intended to hurt her." "No." Damien's voice hardened. "You intended to use her until she became disposable." Hannah shook her head. "No. This doesn't make sense." "I don't know anything." "Exactly," Ethan replied. "You didn't. You were simply the easiest path into the Moretti estate." Every color drained from Hannah's face. "My friend, Lucy?" Ethan nodded. "We approached her 6 months ago. She believed she was helping you meet someone nice. She never knew who we really were." Tears immediately filled Hannah's eyes. She was tricked too." "Yes," Damien answered before Ethan could. "Victor Salvatore specializes in manipulating ordinary people. They create fake identities, manufacture trust." "And wait." Hannah slowly lowered herself back into her chair. Everything suddenly made sense. The coincidence, the perfect conversation, the strangely specific questions about the estate. She had nearly answered them. She almost helped them. Not because she was careless, because she honestly believed someone had simply wanted to know her. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I was so stupid." "No." Damien's answer came instantly. "You were kind. There is a difference." She looked up at him. For just a moment, the restaurant disappeared. The frightened guests, the armed guards, the rival operative, none of it mattered. She saw only Damien, standing between her and danger without a second's hesitation. Ethan slowly rose from his chair. "You know, I almost feel bad." Damien didn't move. "You should," Ethan chuckled. "Do you know what surprised me most? You." He looked directly at Damien. "Our reports described you as cold, strategic, impossible to provoke. But all we had to do," he glanced toward Hannah, "was invite your maid to dinner." The room fell silent. Even Marco looked toward Damien. Ethan smiled wider. "You've been in love with her for a very long time." Damien said nothing. He didn't deny it. That silence told everyone everything. Hannah's eyes widened. She stared at Damien as though seeing him for the first time. Ethan laughed. "I spent months studying your organization. I never found your weakness. Turns out, it wasn't your shipping routes. It wasn't your money. It wasn't your soldiers. It was the woman who baked your bread every Sunday." Several diners exchanged shocked glances. Marco slowly closed his eyes. "So that's how the entire city finds out." Damien took one deliberate step forward. "You've said enough." At that moment, 3 men, wearing restaurant uniforms, suddenly reached beneath their jackets. Weapons. The diners screamed. Before the first pistol cleared its holster, Marco tackled one attacker across a table. Gabriel disarmed another with a precise strike to the wrist. Damien moved faster than Hannah could follow. He grabbed her chair and pulled it behind him, shielding her completely with his own body. The third attacker hesitated. His weapon pointed directly at Damien. No one breathed. Then, dozens of red laser dots appeared across the man's chest. The restaurant windows shattered inward. Moretti security had surrounded the entire building. The attacker slowly dropped his gun. "It's over," Gabriel said. Within moments, police sirens echoed outside. Victor Salvatore's operation had collapsed. Ethan was handcuffed without resistance. As officers escorted him away, he looked back one final time. "You won tonight, Moretti. But ask yourself one question. If she never told you about this date, would you ever have admitted how much she meant to you?" The doors closed behind him. Silence returned. Hannah remained standing beside the table. Her hands trembled. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was overwhelmed. She looked at Damien. "So, you followed me?" Marco quietly muttered, "Here we go." Damien answered honestly, "Yes." "You investigated Ethan?" "Yes." "You had people watching me?" "Yes." Hannah took one slow step backward. Pain replaced confusion. "You didn't trust me." Damien's expression changed for the first time all evening. "It was never about trusting you. But I didn't know that." Her voice cracked. "You could have told me. You could have warned me. Instead, you watched." She shook her head. "I thought tonight was about finally letting someone into my life." She swallowed hard. "I didn't realize everyone else already knew more about it than I did." With tears threatening to fall, Hannah turned and walked toward the restaurant exit. Damien instinctively stepped after her, then stopped. For perhaps the first time in years, the most powerful man in the city realized there was one battle no amount of money, influence, or force could win. The battle for the heart of the woman he had just protected. The Moretti estate had never felt so quiet. Not because the staff were afraid, because someone was missing. 3 days had passed since the incident at the restaurant. The rival syndicate's operation had collapsed. Victor Salvatore's network had suffered its worst intelligence failure in years. Ethan Cross had accepted a plea agreement in exchange for testimony. The immediate danger was over. Yet Damien felt no sense of victory. Every morning he still walked into his study before sunrise. Every morning a fresh cup of coffee waited on his desk. One of the housekeepers faithfully prepared it. It tasted exactly the same. But somehow, It wasn't right. The bread came from the estate kitchen, perfectly baked, perfectly warm, yet Damien left it untouched. Marco eventually walked into the study, carrying several documents. "You've ignored breakfast 3 days in a row. I'm busy. You've signed the same contract twice." Damien looked down. Marco was right. His signature appeared on both pages. Something he had never done before. Marco gently placed the paperwork aside. "You should go see her." Damien stared out the window. "I already frightened her once. If I push again, I'll lose her completely." Marco smiled. "You know what I find interesting?" Damien raised an eyebrow. "You've negotiated peace treaties between criminal families. You've stared down judges. You've survived assassination attempts. But one disappointed housemaid," he chuckled softly, "has completely defeated Damien Moretti. For the first time in days." Damien smiled. Only briefly. Meanwhile, Hannah sat inside a small neighborhood bakery. The comforting smell of fresh cinnamon surrounded her. Lucy stirred her coffee nervously. "I'm so sorry." Hannah reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. "This wasn't your fault. I should have checked." "No." Hannah shook her head. "They fooled both of us." Lucy hesitated. "So, what are you going to do now?" Hannah looked out the window. "I don't know. I miss the estate. I miss everyone." She stopped. Lucy smiled knowingly. "And?" Hannah looked down at her untouched tea. "I miss him." The words surprised even her. She remembered every small moment she had dismissed over the years. The mornings he quietly finished breakfast, after insisting he wasn't hungry. The evenings he pretended not to notice the fresh bread waiting outside his office. The winter afternoon, he silently draped his own coat across her shoulders when the heating system failed. The birthday gift that had arrived anonymously, a set of professional baking tools she had admired months earlier. She had always assumed someone from the kitchen purchased them. Now, she wasn't so sure. Back at the estate, Gabriel entered Damien's office carrying an old cardboard box. "We found this while reorganizing storage." Damien looked inside. Small, handwritten recipe cards. Every loaf of bread Hannah had baked over the past 3 years. Each recipe carried notes. "Less salt. Boss actually finished this one. Try rosemary next Sunday." Another card read, "He looked tired today. Add extra honey. Maybe he'll eat more." Damien carefully picked up the final card. The handwriting was smaller, almost hidden in one corner. "I wish he'd stop pretending he has to carry everything alone." For a long moment, he simply stood there. Then he quietly closed the box. "Prepare the car." An hour later, the bell above the bakery door chimed softly. Hannah looked up. Every conversation inside stopped. Damien Moretti stood in the doorway. No bodyguards, no convoy, no expensive overcoat. Just one man carrying a plain brown paper bag. He walked toward her table. "May I sit?" She nodded. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Damien placed the paper bag on the table. Inside lay one slightly burnt loaf of bread. Hannah blinked. "You baked this?" "I tried." A tiny laugh escaped her despite everything. "It's terrible." "I know." It collapsed. "The crust is uneven. And I may have confused sugar with salt." She smiled wider. "I can tell." Damien looked directly into her eyes. "I finally understood something. When you weren't there, the mansion kept running. The business kept growing. The money kept coming." He paused, but it stopped feeling like home. Hannah's smile slowly faded. He continued quietly. "I thought I was protecting an employee. I was lying to myself. I was protecting the woman I couldn't imagine losing." His voice remained calm. Yet every word carried absolute honesty. I wasn't angry because you had a date. I was terrified. Terrified that someone else might discover what I realized too late. He took a slow breath. That somewhere between your reminders to take my medication, your arguments over breakfast, and every loaf of bread you quietly left outside my office, I fell in love with you. The bakery fell completely silent. Even the barista stopped pretending not to listen. Hannah felt tears fill her eyes. You should have told me. I know. I was afraid. She laughed softly through her tears. The most feared man in the city was afraid? Damien smiled. Only of one woman. She stood, walked around the table, then wrapped her arms around him. Not because he was powerful, not because he had rescued her, because for the first time, he had allowed himself to be vulnerable. She rested her forehead against his. I don't need a bodyguard. I don't need a mansion. I don't need a mafia boss. I only need the man who secretly ate my bread every Sunday. Damien laughed. A genuine laugh, one his employees had almost never heard. Several months later, the Moretti estate looked exactly the same. The gardens bloomed. The staff hurried through familiar hallways. Fresh bread filled the kitchen with its comforting aroma. Only one thing had changed. During the annual charity gala, reporters gathered outside the mansion gates. One journalist asked the inevitable question. Mr. Moretti, there have been rumors. Who is the woman standing beside you? Damien looked toward Hannah. She was no longer wearing a maid's uniform. Instead, she stood confidently in an elegant midnight blue dress. Still smiling with the same warmth that had first transformed his lonely mornings. Damien gently took her hand. His answer was simple. This is Hannah Brooks. He smiled proudly. The woman who taught me that fear isn't losing an empire. It's losing the person who makes coming home worth it. The cameras flashed. The estate staff applauded. Marco quietly whispered to Gabriel. I told him he was jealous. Gabriel smirked. You told him on day one. Hannah laughed. Damien kissed her forehead. And for the first time in many years, the most feared mansion in the city finally became